Hypertension is a big issue. It's a top 10 killer for Black people. Hostile personality disorder, in my opinion, is an outgrowth of that hypertension. And it speaks to the tension and the anger and the negativity that and hostility that Black people have towards one another. I think a lot of times when we see each other, when we engage each other, when we conversate with each other, we do so with an expectation of disrespect. We do so with an expectation of disagreement. We do so with an expectation of confrontation. So when Black people disagree with each other, automatically our blood begins to boil, our pressure begins to rise, because that environment is one that we've seen so many times lead to conflict and casualty. And I think there's a lot of brothers and sisters out there who are contributing to their very own high blood pressure by constantly walking around with this hostile personality disorder that I don't think is necessary. If you have to go to war, then your body will be prepared to go to war at that moment. But I don't think you should walk around with the expectation and presumption that if you have to have a disagreement with a Black person, it can't be respectful and that it has to lead to conflict. So I think hostile personality disorder is a big problem in the Black community.
And it's wild because I remember growing up, I grew up in East Orange, right? And I just remember that reflecting on my youth, I couldn't be nice for survival purposes in that environment. It's like if you're nice, it's like you're targeted in a sense. So you have to have a certain level of hostility to survive in these environments.
That speaks to the lack of community. You know, that's why we call them hoods, because we don't have neighborhoods. If we had a neighborhood, you can be yourself. If we had a neighborhood, you can be at peace with people. You could wear your real skin, your real personality, your real disposition. But I see this in the schools with the children, where the nicest of children have to act tough. They have to act hostile. They have to act like they're big and bad, because if I don't, somebody may try me. So we do have an issue in society in general, but particularly in our community, because that's what we're speaking of, where Black people, children in particular, feel like I got to act like I'm tougher than leather so nobody will bother me. And I think that's a shame, because that also contributes to the release of cortisol and other hormones in the body that contribute to high blood pressure, weakened immune systems, and all types of other issues. That anger, that low grade contextual anger and anxiety that Black people carry with them on a regular basis, I believe is an underrated contributor to the disease culture we have, the cancer culture that we have, and of course, the negative interactions and relationship culture that we have as well.
Poverty is the fourth leading cause of death in America. Do you see the poverty situation improving or getting worse for Black people in America?
Poverty will only get worse for Black people. I think it's going to get worse for everyone. But when America catches a cold, we get the flu. We have to understand poverty is absolutely essential for capitalism to survive. In order for capitalism to survive, you got to have a large, exploitable population of free laborers. If there's no broke people to slave for the corporations can't get rich. The whole idea behind capitalism is you make people work for pennies while you rake in millions. And because of that, for that reason, there will always be poverty. But the reason it's going to grow now more than ever in the past is, number one, we have artificial intelligence coming. And with artificial intelligence, you're going to see the elimination of a lot of jobs that otherwise help Black people take care of their bills. I read recently McDonald's laying off thousands of people, Walmart laying off thousands of people, Microsoft laying off thousands of people, Google even laid off thousands of people. So when I look at artificial intelligence and when I look at the advance of technology, it appears that it's going to lead to an ever shrinking, a smaller market for employment. And so I think Black people need to really start thinking about this right now and get ahead of it before it's too late. And I also think this poverty is being engineered as well, because poverty is one of the most effective weapons you can use to keep down population, to keep up crime, to keep up political disorganization. Impoverished communities are rarely effective politically. Rarely, because why? They're overly consumed with their day-to-day needs being met. So I think a lot of it is being engineered. You know, in the Black community in particular, we know that they came into our community and destroyed the economic foundation, the industrial building trades back in the 1970s. They induced the poverty to give rise to the mass incarceration system in the single parented female headed household. So I think a lot of it is engineered, but most of it is a byproduct of capitalism. And one of the things I try to get black people to see and to understand, capitalism only worked because they had a 500-year head start through our enslavement. Slavery was the original capital. We were the original investment. We was the original stock. So of course capitalism looks good because you're not looking at it from the perspective that it got a 500-year head start by free labor of African people. Capitalism is not a system for humanity. Why would you want individuals to dominate the economy that everybody has to use in order to live? Capitalism is exploitation, and poverty is one of its side effects.
Statistics say black women in America are 5 times more likely to get an abortion than other groups, which I feel is wrong. But people who are anti-abortion usually approach the issue from a moral standpoint. Do you believe abortion in the black community is viewed as a moral issue or a political issue?
Both. I think abortion in the black community is viewed as both a moral issue and a political issue. For me, it's more about the politics than the morality, because when you view it from a moral perspective, that leads to condemnation and it leads to judgment. And I don't think that really benefits us as a people. It is not my place to tell a woman what to do with her body, but at the same time, as Africans, we are fundamentally a pro-life people, because we understand that when you give birth, that is the reincarnation of an ancestor. That is a life coming to this world with a specific purpose given to it by the Supreme Almighty God. So we have to look at it from the spiritual perspective. You're actually stopping the destiny of the universe and the destiny of the black race by aborting that child. With that being said, if you have a young sister who doesn't have any family support, you have a young sister who's the father of her child isn't interested in being there, he don't want the child. You have a young sister dealing with poverty and people are constantly telling her that you don't want to have a baby this early. And then you look at the reality that young mothers tend not to graduate high school on time, if at all. They often tend not to graduate college, if at all. Now, we all know dozens of black women who achieved in spite of, but there's so many thousands more who did not. But I think we have to look at the fact that we have aborted over 3 million babies since the 1970s. I mean, we have to look at the fact that Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood International and her Negro Project were all part of the American eugenics crusade to get rid of black life. It's no secret that 75% of Planned Parenthood abortion centers are located within close proximity to black communities. Even when you look at what Planned Parenthood is doing in the Caribbean, what they're doing in Africa, if you look purely at the numbers.
I heard Dr. Amos Wilson once say, black people have severe case of myopia, right? A lot of things we say are not there, are here. We just don't see them. For example, many programs and businesses black people say that we need are there, but they don't support them. What's your thoughts about that?
Well, shout out to Dr. Amos Wilson. I think he was the greatest black psychologist in American history. And I think he was the most relevant black scholar of the second half of the 20th century. And like myself, he was a doctor of clinical psychology and a Garveyite Pan-Africanist. I do believe that we have many institutions and businesses that are not getting the support that they should, as black people complain about the need for them. But at the same time, when we're talking about the critical institutions, the banks, the hospitals, the schools, the supermarket, the distribution and manufacturing, I don't believe we have nearly as much as we should. You know, for example, you take the hospitals. We owned and controlled over 500 hospitals in American history. That's nearly one per year. You can hardly find them now. We only have about a handful of black hospitals. Independent schools, truly independent, that operate inside of a traditional school building, not in somebody's basement or kitchen table, you're probably looking at 3 dozen. If you look at truly black-owned banks, you probably may have about 2 or 3 dozen of those. So when you look at the critical institutions, we do have black farmers, but we don't have a network and a relationship between the black farmers and the black communities to get their produce out to us. And of course, we don't have the supermarkets to sell that produce on a regular basis. So when you're talking about the critical institutions, the schools, the banks, the hospitals, the supermarkets, the manufacturing and distribution, we are at a significant loss for those things. The institutions that matter most, we are at a loss for them. Now, we have restaurants and barbershops, and we need restaurants and barbershops, but they're not critical institutions. Why? You can cut your own hair. I cut my own hair. I've been doing it since high school because we was trained to do so at my high school. So you can live without a beauty salon. You know, women can do hair in the house. You can live without a restaurant. You can cook your own food in the house. So, you know, although they're good to have, they're good conveniences, they're not necessities. Hospitals save lives. Banks invest and build communities. Supermarkets, you know, build the family, build the body, take care of the dietary nutritional needs. Schools prepare the children. Manufacturing provide our people with their daily necessities. Distribution provides jobs and allow Black people to get the things that they need around the planet. When it comes to critical institutions, we are at a significant loss.
After years of observation, right, I've come to the conclusion that sports are destroying our young Black brothers, making them delusional, depressed, and hopeless. I've seen this trend where you have a lot of teenagers who are not even on the team, but they have this idea that they're going to college or going to go to the league. I see a lot of young men who are they're 25 to 30 years old, still saying they're trying to get to the league. During this period now, they're not developing any skills to provide for themselves or society. Also, what you know about parents living through their child, which contributes to it, and which I know you're going to talk on, the amount of attention given to athletes. What are your views about the relationship with sports in the Black community?
I think that sports are overemphasized in the Black community. And I think this ties into a legacy coming from slavery, where Black men and Black women our worth was determined on our physical attributes. And to a large extent, it's still the same way now. If you are an athlete, the way in which your worth is determined is identical to the way in which the worth of an enslaved African was determined. It was your output, your strength, how fast you could work. You look at the NFL combine, you look at the NBA workouts, it's nothing but a slave plantation. The only difference is you're being paid money. But the power differential between a slave and a slave master, and the power differential between the NBA player and the NBA owner, or the NFL player and the NFL owner, is the exact same as the power differential between a slave and his master. The only difference is they are given money that allows them to live a comfortable life outside of the plantation. But beyond that, it is the same thing as slavery. They don't have no voice. They're afraid. They're timid. Their behavior is strictly controlled. It is slavery. And the only reason why we don't see professional sports as slavery is because the amount of money that they make. And that's because we equate money with power. Money is not power. Money buys you access. Power gives you the ability to control outcomes. These athletes do not control outcomes, and most of them don't even control their own lives. I also think that we have to look at the fact that the Black community overvalues sports and athletics, and we undervalue academic excellence. The child who gets straight A's and B's, the child who's mentally gifted, the child who aced his SATs, the child who's in the top 1% smartest children, you know, best reading scores, math scores, science scores, language scores, they will never get the attention of the basketball standout, even if he's an academic failure. They will never get the attention of a football standout, even if he's an academic failure. He could be failing 3 classes and he's still going to get a big trophy at the end of the year for helping them go to the playoffs or win the playoffs. He may have no future after he leaves that school that year, but because he won the championship, got us a trophy, we're going to put him on a pedestal. But the kid who's likely to come up with a cure for cancer, sitting right in his classroom, is not even going to be mentioned. And so we have to look at how we as a people have allowed public school culture and Black community culture to overvalue athletes and entertainers and undervalue our children who are academically excellent. That's on us. And then you have to look at the fact that our children don't have access to role models in those careers where they live. The dentist don't live in our neighborhood. The surgeon doesn't live in our neighborhood. The engineer doesn't live in our neighborhood. You barely find Black teachers and Black principals who live in a predominantly Black neighborhood. Most of your Black bourgeoisie, your middle class, is moving into a white life. So how are Black children going to have access to role models that might make them think twice about wanting to be an athlete or entertainer when they're not around? they're going to gravitate to what they see. And what do they see in their neighborhood? Aspiring rappers and aspiring entertainers and athletes. And what do they see on the television? Rappers who made it and athletes who made it. So whether they're outside on the street or in the house watching YouTube, all they see is black men who overvalue athletics and entertainment, even though these are low potential careers. And what I mean by that is the likelihood of you becoming rich or wealthy or being good enough in athletics or entertainment to live comfortably off it is very slim. You have a greater chance of being struck by lightning than you do of becoming a professional athlete or entertainer. But no one's telling our children this. And this is one of the reasons why I believe we need to bring the industrial building trade programs back into our communities. Because I do believe that even if he wants to be a rapper, even if he wants to be a basketball player, if he doesn't make it and he's a licensed plumber, a licensed electrician, a licensed welder, a licensed auto mechanic, a licensed HVAC contractor, he can still live a decent life for himself. But right now, black boys in inner city schools are only given 3 options. Go into the military, become an athlete or an entertainer, or go to jail.